Good afternoon. We are now live on Patient Advocates Transforming Healthcare Tuesday Table Talk. Thank you to all of us joining us today. Thank you to our audience, for joining us today, and as well as my guest. I'm really excited about today's topic and our guest for today's show. First, I just wanted to share a couple housekeeping reminders. If you are signed into YouTube, you can always ask us questions during our conversation today. And certainly we hope to get to those questions. And as always, we really are grateful and appreciative of your continued support of our table talks. My name is Hala Dura. I am the founder of Patient Advocates Transforming Healthcare, as well as a patient family engagement advocate and consultant. PATH is a diverse and passionate coalition of independent health thought leaders who seek to transform healthcare through the integration and advancement of patient, family, caregiver, and community engagement. Through our coalition's advocacy, expertise, and experience, we serve as trusted partners in the quest for a more equitable and community-centered healthcare system. Today, I am joined by three amazing women, and I am really humbled to have and honored to have them all with me today, particularly as we celebrate Women's History Month, International Women's Day. I can't think of three better guests to join me today to really show the power and strength of women and really demonstrate the voice of advocacy, particularly as mothers, as women, as sisters. So I'm really pleased and honored that all of our guests are joining us today. And Nikki Montgomery, who's my fellow PATH leader and advocate extraordinaire, is going to lead our discussion today. I am joined by the authors of We Dare to Be Brave, African American Moms and the Emotional Journey of Raising Children with Disabilities. And so I'm not going to take any more time up. Nikki, I'm going to kick it off to you, and we so look forward to today's discussion. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ella. I'm excited to be here and talking about our experiences as well. I'm Nikki Montgomery, a patient advocate, and I came to this work because I am both the sibling and the parent of someone with complex medical needs. So it's been a part of my life's journey to be involved in healthcare and to be at least peripherally engaged. As I got older and had a child with healthcare needs, my engagement needed to be a lot more intensive than it did as a sibling. So a lot of what I've been able to work on is great projects with the women that are sitting here with me today. Patricia and Selena are two women that I know and love, and we had the privilege of working together on a book that Hala mentioned, and we really wanted to make sure we were empowering families. So I'd first like to let Pat and Selena introduce themselves and tell us just a little bit about your medical journey with your child too.
Well, my name is Patricia Parker. I am a parent of an adult. He's 30 years old. He has autism and he has epilepsy. I would say my journey with just the initial diagnosis was just the most, the difficult initial start of it. Getting that diagnosis and the prognosis together was very difficult. It was hard enough getting the diagnosis of pervasive developmental disorder, but being it combined with the prognosis of everything that he wasn't doing in the present and everything he would not do in the future was just devastating. And getting all that information with just no resource on what to do with it, how to emotionally process it. It was a very difficult start of my journey.
Thank you, Pat. Selena?
My name is Selena Miller, and I have a 16-year-old son named Elijah who has autism. He also has epilepsy, complex medical conditions, congenital glaucoma. And so just like Patricia said, just getting those diagnoses were very difficult, and they didn't all come at one time. It was one diagnosis, then you go for a few years, then all of a sudden he has epilepsy. So I'm still trying to process the special need of autism and developmental delay. Then 4 years later, we get epilepsy diagnosis. And then 4 years after that, he had other complex medical conditions, which really kept us in the hospital a lot for weeks on end, and unfortunately not having a name for the diagnosis. So there's a lot of trauma there. There is for myself and for Elijah. But our journey is quite unique, and it was quite stressful. So there was a lot just trying to get diagnosis for him and the treatments that he needs.
Thank you both. When you were embarking on this medical journey with your kids, what do you think made you feel powerful finally? Because I hear a lot of the trauma and a lot of the shock, but what happened and what moment do you remember feeling finally powerful and like you had a role?
For me, it was just after finally processing all the information that I was giving, and then finally having a voice to be able to determine what services he might need, and started advocating and looking for resources. I think initially on, before Matthew was diagnosed, I had already raised concerns with my pediatrician. And you have to remember, this is back in the early 90s when Matthew was diagnosed. It was like 1 in 10,000 then. And, he basically attributed my concerns to just being a new mother. And I mean, Matthew had feeding problems early on. He had no eye contact. He was having tantrums just at the sound. Any sound would just really set him off. And so I was feeling powerless because I was just not being taken seriously. But then after initially getting the diagnosis and actually coming to the point of knowing that I had to be the person that was going to be his voice, and then actually, working with the school district and actually be able to extend that voice about what I felt he needed, then I started to gain some more power then. And being able to ask questions and being able to get the answers I needed to make the informed choices, I start feeling more and more powerful.
Thank you, Pat. Pat, to follow up with you, was there something that made you feel initially like you couldn't ask questions?
I think it was just, fear and just intimidation. When you're dealing with professionals, sometimes you're being talked at, not talked to. Mm-hmm. And I think the information that was given to me was so technical that I really didn't understand a lot of the information. So, just being fearful, not understanding, and being talked at all at one time, I just felt powerless. And I just felt that decisions were being made that I really didn't even understand and maybe not even agree with.
Right. Thank you, Pat. And Selena, what about you?
I think my power built up most when Elijah started to get those medical diagnosis. And I think because of my journey with him with the school district, just like Pat said, like knowing that you have a voice, but intimidated by those who have a lot of initials behind their name. And maybe you don't, maybe I don't have a college degree at the time. And so I already felt as though I was like this compared to the individuals that I was in a room with. I think the day that I really got the courage and got the power was when I saw Elijah struggling in the hospital, and I'm constantly telling doctors, don't do this, don't do that. This will set him off. He's anxious. Let's do this. And I was not being listened to. And I had vowed then that no longer will I allow this to go forth. And so from that day on, I was at rounds. They would not have rounds without me. I was even asked by nurses, are you a nurse? Are you a doctor? But no, I paid attention to what doctors were saying. I took that information in. I studied that information. And I always remember that I am Elijah's voice, just like Patricia said, but I'm also an expert on Elijah. So I had to let them know that it is imperative that we work together, because I can help your life to be a little stressed less, and vice versa. We just need to work together and explain to them the importance of working together.
Thank you. And it reminds me of a story that I have too, because one of the first moments that I was kind of in shock in the healthcare system, I had my tiny little 6-week-old that I took to the pulmonologist for the first time. And he had one of those older, gruff pulmonologists, and he came in and looked at him and said, that kid's going to need a trach and a vent. And then he turned around and left. And that was the end of that interaction. And to me, I didn't know what that meant. So I didn't know that you could live on a trach. I thought trach was a life support before you died. So I thought he was telling me my 6-week-old baby was dying. So I held it all together, and he had walked out of the room. I didn't have anybody to ask questions to. So I got home, broke down, cried, called my sister. And when my sister talked to me, she was like, well, trachs are not forever. And I'm like, no, he didn't tell me that. Like, he hadn't told me key pieces of information that would have empowered me in that moment to figure out what I could do to proceed, to figure out how I could be effective with him. He didn't give me any of that. He was just, coming in, telling me what he thought. And then I was left alone with that information. So, Pat, I can identify with, getting a diagnosis bomb dropped on you and not having the information to feel like you can move forward as a caregiver and as a parent. So all of that together made me feel devastated in that moment. And we could have had a much better start if he had just given me the information I needed. So to me, that sense of empowerment came from first realizing that I might not always get what I needed from the doctor-patient interaction, and that I would have to learn to seek outside sources of information for myself and bring those back so I could talk to the doctor about them. But certainly in that moment, I did not feel any power, and I did feel devastated. And that's, to me, not what we should leave patients and families with as they are in the healthcare setting. That's a horrible feeling. In the book, we do a lot of talking about the emotions that we experience dealing with schools, dealing with healthcare, and we all have very complex children. I want to talk to you a little bit more about like what it's like to try to navigate that, and do you feel that navigation is more complex as a woman of color?
Yes, I would definitely say it is. I think the thing is that you don't have anyone many times to identify with. When you're sitting in meetings, you're the only individual there. And a lot of things that are said are maybe not always cultural sensitive. And, so most definitely, I saw my challenges of being a woman of color. Even trying to get the information and the supports I need was not always in my community. And I actually had to go outside of my community, which was outside of my comfort zone, to get the needed support. So yes, there are definitely significant challenges. I would definitely say that.
And Selena, same for you. What challenges do you think you face being a woman of color trying to navigate this space?
I think some of the challenges I faced again is that not being taken seriously, not being taken that our voice matters, the biases that we encounter when you're in the medical office or even dealing with the school district. And like Patricia said, the lack of services. This is already a lonely journey, and we didn't have a lot of places in our own community that had people with our faces or that can identify with, like Pat said, our cultural differences. So it definitely was tough. I agree 100% that being a woman of color, we already have challenges, but this made it even harder to go through, with just not being able to have the proper resources or people that can understand where you're coming from.
Thank you, Selena. I've had similar experiences myself. And for me, I feel like I come into healthcare knowing the data. And that's sometimes a really bad thing, because I don't have the expectation of excellent care. I know I'm going to have to fight to get excellent care. And a lot of times for me, I feel like I deal with the same stereotypes, and I have to front load, here's what my educational background is, and here's what my advocacy background is, in order to get that respect. And then the tone changes. I've experienced physicians being very dismissive with me, and I say, well, I have a master's in this, and I have to, recite all the letters behind my name in order to get that tone to shift to one of respect and one where I feel heard. And when I even think about like Beyonce being in the hospital and having difficulties with her childbirth, and Serena Williams having the same kinds of troubles, if those women cannot get doctors to listen to them, like what's it going to be like for me? I'm just regular old Nikki, So it's a little frightening to me to be in a healthcare space when you know that even prominent women of color who are wealthy, who have access, still are not heard. When we know that medical students, for example, still largely think that we have different pain levels, or that we, all of those different things combine to me when I'm in a healthcare space. And I feel like it's overwhelming because I'm evaluating all of that as I'm in that space. So I'm not only dealing with an urgent medical issue, but I'm also evaluating whether I'm being treated as human. And I experienced this just last week. I had to take my son to the emergency room, and I'm trying to figure out, do they see him? Are they respecting him? Do they see me? You know, it's hard to tell, and it's a stressor just to make sure they're going to do the right thing because they really see him as a person. And yeah, I feel like that's a hard thing to navigate, because no matter what preparation I have, I still am just as vulnerable in the healthcare space as if I did not have that preparation.
And also what makes it more stressful for us is that we're already going in worried, nervous about our child. And then you have to add on top of that, I have to go in like this. And Nikki, you hit it right on the head. I've had to go in and change my entire demeanor from the worried mom to, this is what I do. This is my life. I have this degree. I have this. I run this organization. Like, I have to run down my resume. And then the whole, like you say, the whole dynamic in the room changed. Oh my God, what can we do? And how can we do this? But it shouldn't be that way. Right. And I can't focus on my child because I'm too busy trying to prove who I am to you to get what we need for him.
Yeah.
And I just want to add too, you know, with Matthew being an adult, you know, sometimes it's expected that he can advocate or he can speak for himself, but Matthew has very limited communication. Mm-hmm. And I know that my experience with him when he was actually in the hospital, me being able to speak for him and be his voice, I really was concerned about his care being compromised because he could not always say when he was in pain. He could not always say what his needs were. And so I just literally lived at the hospital 24/7. I mean, he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I did not leave his side because I was concerned, would he get the same type of medical care? Would there might be an incident, which there was, with his care if I wasn't there? So it's even more stressful when they're an adult and they have to talk to you. I mean, many times they would only want to talk to him. And then they would really see that he could not answer the question. And then they would finally come to me. But I really, really was like the watchdog for him. So it was very, very stressful and scary at times.
Right. Well, that hypervigilance is part of trauma, right? That you experience this trauma and you have to guard them. You have to watch over them like hawks. And I still feel that same way. My son was not verbal for the first 4 years, so I always had to be by his side. But even now, he has speech delays. I would be concerned about leaving him at a hospital because they might not understand him. It's just, it makes it complicated to know overall whether that universe of care is what you're supposed to be having at that moment. And, I was shocked myself last week that I was still so intimidated in the medical environment. And I was really bothered by that. Like I'm on the board at the hospital, and I still felt like I need to make sure that he's getting what he's supposed to get. And that's kind of terrifying, especially with children with disabilities, and also knowing that during COVID, if a hospital's low on resources, will they choose your child alive? Will they value your life like you value their life? So all of that kind of comes together in that medical space, and it's definitely left me feeling vulnerable many times. For all of you, what do you think healthcare could do to make this better for us?
Definitely be more family-centered, even with the communication style, how they communicate, how they even address the needs of the individual and the entire family, because whatever affects the family affects the individual and vice versa. And just look at the whole unit and just definitely the communication, make it family friendly that everyone can understand, and give parents a chance to process. Sometimes all the information is just given to you at one time. You're not able to process all the information, and before you can even get all your questions answered, or even before you even know what questions to ask, they just kind of moved on to the next person. So just giving parents time to process information and just, all of that.
Thanks, Pat. Selena, any thoughts?
I agree. I agree that patience is definitely number one for me, and just understanding, or at least as we teach some of the medical students that come in through milestones, like a partnership between the parent and the doctor is very important. We each have the same outcome, and that is to make sure that our individuals are being taken care of and healed. And so just doing the best to work together and look at each other as a team versus I'm the doctor and you're the patient, but as a team working together for the same result.
One of the things that I've always thought about is caregiver support and making sure we are making sure that the caregiver is okay. In all of the 9+ years that my son has been involved in intensive healthcare needs like tracheostomy, ventilator, nobody has ever said to me, "Are you okay?" Nobody to this day. And it's every time I leave a medical encounter and no one's asked me that, it amazes me. My doctor doesn't do that. His doctors don't do that. We are living in a life that's very traumatic sometimes. I've seen my son code more times than I ever want to remember in my life. Those kinds of supports that would have helped me process that, nobody asks me if I need them. And to me, if you are looking universally, Pat, like you said, about the unit, looking at that unit universally, not just the patient, but the people who are supporting that patient, then you have to look at the well-being of the caregiver. And I think that's lacking.
Yes, most definitely. And my experience with Matthew in the hospital is that no one really brought a social worker to me. I knew to ask for a social worker to come in to assist me to navigate. It was a lot of things I had to navigate. But the doctor or the staff or no one says, "Can we bring a social worker?" I literally said, "I need a social worker assigned to me because I need support here." They brought an excellent social worker in, and then we were able to work together as a team. But what if I didn't know to ask?
Yes.
That's the scary part. Some parents, some families just don't know to ask for one.
They don't. And where would you find this information? It's not in your little packet at the hospital. Like, they don't give this to you. They give you a pile of papers. You're supposed to know, understand what's in these papers. I'm personally always upset when those papers are not literacy friendly. So you have a pile of complex papers with complex language that gets thrown at you. And then you get no real instruction on navigation. So it's something that you either have to fall into by accident or someone has to walk you through, and you have to know to ask for it, which disenfranchises so many people. That's the part that worries me. Like, I feel like we are empowered parents, but how many people are not empowered? How many people are left behind because they don't have the information they need to navigate? Selena, what do you think was important about writing this book?
What was important about writing this book was letting parents know that they were not alone in some of those emotions, some of those fears, some of those things that they encounter on a day-to-day basis. I think us being able to express our challenges, our courage, our strength gives other parents, it empowers them. It says, okay, I'm not the only one going through this. Whew, thank you for sharing your story, because it may make them feel, okay, I can do this. Because I know there have been times during this journey where I wanted to give up, but you can't give up. You know what I mean? Like, this is so overwhelming, emotions coming from everywhere. I don't know what to do. So I'm glad also that this was not a techie book. So you don't have to worry about reading it and saying, I need a dictionary to understand what I'm reading. It's relatable. It's relatable. And a lot of parents were able to see themselves in the book because they experienced a lot of what we went through as well.
Yeah, I think that part about not being technical, like you have all these, sheets that you might get that say, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not that simple, right? Like it's not as simple as carrying out procedure, because it really is the emotions that you're trying to navigate as you got to get your head straight to navigate this. And I think that part of it, of identifying with those emotions, was really important for me too. And really it was cathartic writing it, because some of that stuff I'd never written down and needed to get that out on paper and really examine what that journey has looked like, because it's had lots of bumps, and thankfully I feel like I've come out on top of that most of the time, but not always still. Now, what do you think you would need to still learn to get the best possible outcomes in healthcare? Like, what are you still looking to learn?
Oh, well, for me, I'm a forever learner. I mean, it's always something for me to learn. And Matthew's changing, Matthew's evolving. He's an adult now. There's definitely different things that we're addressing now as far as him being an adult. So, I mean, just always learning about resources, always learning how to connect, how to network, what's available, what's not available, his behaviors, working toward more independence for him. And I'm older, so trying to phase out my role and not so much hands-on. So it's just a wealth of things. So much for me to continue to learn, and I'm open to learning. I mean, I think we should always be open to learning as advocates because things are constantly changing. What's happening today is not going to be happening that's 2-3 years. So just always learning. Yeah.
Thank you. Selena, what about you?
In a perfect world, I would love to see parents, caregivers, the medical profession come together and be able to work together. For Elijah, similar to what Pat is talking about, Elijah's 16, but just we're working more on independence and him being prepared. Again, we are not going to be here forever. So having to put a plan in place and put things in place for him. And medically, we have a great team now. It took years to build. And again, through the challenges and things, I finally have a team that cares about my opinion. And so I like to, as I think we all do, share the information and knowledge that we have with others. So my hopes is to grow more parents and help to educate more parents. And like Pat said, being a forever learner allows us to bring that back to our community and teach others how to be the best advocate that they can be.
Yeah, for me, I really am focused on building advocacy skills in my son too. Over the years, he's become quite bossy about his care, which is not a bad thing. He's 9.5 years old. He knows whether he's being given a respiratory treatment the right way, whether you've positioned him the right way, and he can speak up for himself. So I'm really proud of that because I feel like it's a skill that, like I said, I still feel intimidated. I'm glad he's not at all intimidated to speak up. I'm glad that we're setting that template, but it's still, I'm still fearful about what healthcare sees when they look at him. So to me, improvement would look like really knowing that we've gone beyond implicit bias to really treat people as full human beings in every encounter, to be listening to people in every encounter. All of that comes together to make me feel safer in healthcare because it is a safety issue. And the one thing I think we have to remember is that bias is a safety issue for me. If you are biased and you change your treatment, that is a safety issue for me. And I think the more that we continue to target it that way, maybe we can get people to understand that. But I think a lot of ways healthcare thinks of, healthcare bias as more of a personal development thing. And it's not about personal development, it's about maintaining the safety of all your patients. So I hope that we transition into that side of healthcare where we're really looking at people as full human beings. That's my biggest fear in healthcare, is to not be seen that way. And COVID makes that more difficult when you have masks on and you can't read facial expressions and you're not having as many in-person interactions. So I think COVID has made that more complicated to feel humanized in healthcare for me. So as we're coming close to a close, I'd like to thank you both just for sharing little parts of your journey. And is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with?
I just want to let parents know that you're not alone. That's why we're here today, just to let you know that there are other parents walking this journey, and we want to be here to encourage you and to support you and share our experiences, both negative and positive experiences, and hopefully it will help you on your journey.
Thank you.
To piggyback off Patricia, but just to, again, encourage parents that it's important to find your community, find your tribe, those who can identify with the road that you're on. Everybody's journey is different, but it's similar also. And so, like Patricia said, you're not alone. So find those people in your community or in other communities that you can talk to, that will walk with you. through the process, because let me tell you, it helps a lot. These ladies I walk side by side with, they teach me, we teach each other, we support one another. And I'm telling you, it makes a world of difference.
Thank you. Hala?
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks, Selena and Patricia. And I just, if people could see me, I was nodding my head the entire conversation because, as you can imagine, all of it resonated with me and the journey we've also had with my own daughter and her care and how I'm quote unquote viewed by the system. So certainly I can relate to many of the experiences you shared, but I will say I am really humbled and honored that all of you have shared your journey with our audience today and in this book, which I hope so many people will buy and read, because I know sometimes it feels like we're alone, but we're not, and being able to hear you guys today, as well as read about your experiences, I'm sure will inspire so many people as they walk on the same journey. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for your advocacy work as well. I know Patricia with your organization Reach, and Selena with Mother to Mother, and Nikki with your advocacy with Madvocator, and the work you also do with the Patient Experience Policy Forum, and many other hats I know all of you wear. So thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. We will be back in April. We're going to take a little break for March and back with more healthcare conversations on Tuesday Table Talk. And if you'd like to always get reminders about our talks, please do subscribe to our PATH YouTube channel. Thanks again to my guests today, and wish everyone a great day. And if my guests could just pause for a few seconds while we close the YouTube stream. And again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. Have a great day.